So just looking at this, you can tell that domain 4, which is call control, will cover 25% of the exam. So on a 100-point exam, which is what the core exam consists of, 25 of those questions will be covering call control. Now, when we decipher the blueprint, it's really important because by looking at the verbs and deciphering which verb goes with which domain and task, it's going to tell you what level of knowledge you're going to need to understand the questions that will be associated with the different tasks. So, for example, 2.0 we're looking at right here is protocols, codecs, and endpoints. That's the domain level, but then if we go down to the task level, which is the 2.2, 2.1 is also a task, but in this example we're talking about 2.2, that's the task. And since it doesn't have any subtasks below it, the questions for 2.0, the domain 2.0, task 2.2 are going to be tied to 2.2. But the 2.1, we actually will tie the items, or tie the items, map the items to the different subtasks. So the items are going to be mapped to either 2.1a, 2.1b, or 2.1c. And those, like I said, are called subtasks. So again, you can see 20% of domain 2 is that's the percentage that the domain 2 is going to be on the whole entire exam. So about 20 questions will be from domain 2. And as far as depth of knowledge, this is what I mentioned before about the verbs. It's very important to familiarize yourself with the blueprint and know the verbs that it has on the blueprint. We have a describe, explain, and these are just going to be verbs I'm going to show over here that actually are on the core exam for collaboration. But in some of the other exams, they use different verbs that also map to the same, verbs: remember, apply, and analyze. But for the core exam, we've got a lot of describe and explain questions at the remember level, which is basically memory recall. We have configure, implement, and deploy. That's at the apply level. So it's going to ask you to actually do something to solve the question. And then we have troubleshoot and identify, which is at our analyze level. So that's going to be given a scenario that you have an actual problem, and you're going to choose which is the next step to fix the problem. So the 6 major areas of knowledge, like we briefly went over before, for the core exam are infrastructure and design, and again, that's 20% of the exam. We have protocols, codecs, and endpoints at 20%. Cisco, iOS, XE Gateway, and media resources at 15. Call control at 25. GOS at 10, and collaboration apps at 10. So this tells you, when you look at the blueprint, just as an overall domain perspective, what the percentages are that you're going to need to familiarize yourself with when you do your study. But if we break it down into each domain, you can see here, infrastructure and design has 6 tasks. And the task, like I said, with the blueprint for domain 1, infrastructure and design, we actually have quite a few described. So that's going to be at the remember level. But then we also have a configure and a troubleshoot. So we've got a lot of the remember, explain is also remember, and then configures, apply, troubleshoots, analyze. So the first couple are going to be more at the basic level, and then we're going to get into sub-configure and troubleshoot. So it's a little bit of all of the verbs in domain 1. Then domain 2, we have 5 tasks. So we actually troubleshoot, deploy, identify, and describe. So domain 2 is going to be a little bit harder, and the questions are going to be a little bit harder than domain 1 because we see only 1 describe here instead of 3 like the last task, the last domain, excuse me. Domain 3, looks like we have 4 tasks here, and again, we have a little bit of everything described at the remember level: troubleshoot, configure, identify. Call control, and again, this is the one I was talking about that's 25% of your exam. So it's going to be, a fourth of the test. So I would definitely study this domain heavily, make sure that you are familiar with, a lot of different terms and being able to configure some things, configure globalized call routing, and implement is also at the apply level. So it's going to be asking you to do something. So it's going to be a little bit more meaty. Yes? The question was, since this domain is going to cover 25% of the exam, is it going to be broken down evenly into the domains and about 5 questions on each task, roughly? No, it's not going to be that. It could be, but it depends on how the tasks are actually weighted. And we work with our psychometricians at the beginning when we develop our blueprint, and a team of SMEs and business unit SMEs that actually help us determine what weight to give to not only the domains like we talked about and I showed, but the tests as well. So it's based on it's based on a few different things, but a little bit of help would be we ask them, how often do you do this task and how important is this task? And as they rate them, the ratings that the SMEs give, they get, the psychometrician will look through them and weight them accordingly to what the SMEs answer, basically. So if one of the tasks is more important and you use it more often, you're going to get more questions from that task, if that makes sense. Does that answer your question? Okay, so QoS, which everybody loves, we have a lot of describes and then one configure. So it's going to be a lot of the remember, again, the real basic remember questions, and then configure LLQ. And I believe this task had 10%, so only about 10 questions will come from this domain. And then the collaboration apps is our last domain, and I believe it's 10% also. We're going to see just one describe on here, but then a few configure and one deploy. So it's going to be, actually getting hands-on and answering, being able to show doing something, configuring something, or deploying something, which again are both under the apply level. So any questions so far on the blueprints? I know we kind of breezed through it, but before I go on to the next thing, I'm going to go over. Any questions? Okay. So the last thing I wanted to talk about is the certification roadmap. This is something that the certification team has just started recently in the last quarter here. And I've been fortunate to work on Collab and was one of the guinea pigs that had to go through this first of my exams along with the UPM for data center. So what this tells us, this is based on a Cisco fiscal year calendar, so it starts in August. And if you look here, the courses that are in yellow actually in a review certification exam mode or phase. And so Q1, we got together with various SMEs, business unit SMEs and experts, and went through all of the current blueprints and through collaboration. It was the core exam and our 5 concentration exams that we looked at earlier. And we went through them and actually decided amongst many people and a couple different teams on what wasn't relevant anymore and what we needed to take out of the blueprints and no longer test on. And then also what's new. What did we want to add in those blueprints to start testing on that we didn't have in there before. So in this process, you can see here, we started in August through October. We had many meetings. We went through and, like I said, met with a bunch of SMEs, and what we came up with was a lot to decipher and go through because a lot of different teams want different things on the exam, for their own purpose and what they think is important, and it might be different than what someone else thinks. So it was a struggle, but we've been through it, and it was a good process. And so we are now getting ready to launch those new exams for collaboration in February. It's going to be February 20th that they're going to be launched. But this is a little thing that's important here as well. The announcement for the blueprint changes for data and collaboration were both announced on January 19th. So if you look now on our websites, cisco.com and the Cisco Learning Network, you'll see the new blueprints on there. And what's important to know that when we did this process, we only wanted to change up to 20% for each blueprint. And that's because we didn't want the people that were in the midst of studying for exams to be thrown off and, you work so hard and study for months to take an exam and then we change them on you and what you've been studying doesn't matter anymore. We didn't want that to happen. So we actually on our, I don't know if you see here. No, it's not on here, but there's a website that you can go to that will actually give you all of the information as far as what we changed, what we took off the blueprints for each of the exams and what we added. and that will help you in your studying as well, so you know what to focus on the new blueprints, especially if you were already studying before. You can kind of compare and see what's different, what we took off and what we added. And we're going to be doing this every year. The collaborations will fall in Q1. So next August or October, the collaboration team will meet again, go through the same process, update the blueprints with up to 20%, whatever changes needed, no more than 20%, and then release them again in April of 2024. And as you can see here, all of our different tracks go through the same process, just in different quarters. So for example, right now we're in February, so in February, the review service provider and CCNA are going through, they're just starting their process, and then they'll take it through, and those exams will be launched obviously sometime in October of this year. So it's, we know in the past we didn't update the blueprints as often as this because it's very cumbersome and hard to do, and takes a lot of manpower and hours and things like that to do. So we've committed to doing this every year now. So this is the roadmap of what it's going to look like. And again, there's release notes that are very detailed for each exam on the roadmap website that will tell you exactly what those changes are, so you know what to adjust in your study if you're in the middle of studying. And so, are there any questions? Yes.
On the concentration exam, one of them said it was going end of life. Is there going to be a replacement for it, or is it just
Okay, the question was for the concentration exams, the one that was end of life, the conferencing exam, is it going to be replaced? Is it going to be replaced?
right? Yes, is there going to be another
exam to replace it? No, this time there's not going to be another exam to replace the concentration exam, but I have been told by the content team that the course will stay active. So they'll be able, those that would like to take the course, and the course is still available, but you won't be able to test on it.
Thank you.
Welcome. Anything else I can answer for you? No? Okay, thank you. I appreciate your time, and enjoy yourselves at Cisco Live.